Brave Maker Show is hosted by Tony Gaffestone and Christina Jackson. Thanks for tuning in. It's showtime.
Hey, everybody. It is showtime. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's my pleasure to be with you all. Oh my gosh, I have had the funniest afternoon. My life is full of just obstacles and ridiculous things, but it's totally the filmmaker's life. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm Tony Gaffestone. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Brave Maker. I love being a writer and director, producer of movies, and I love talking about the making of, the brave making of art with my co-collaborator, Christina Jackson.
Hey, Tony. Yes, this is awesome to be here. Super excited for today's show. And my pronouns are he, she, they. I'm queer. I'm an African-American woman. And I am rocking a cosplay look today that is a combination of Superman meets Shirley Chisholm, if you could imagine that, if you're not watching the live show. And I'm coming to you from Dublin, California. And I'm sitting in, as always, my favorite power chair, the Will Model C.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're making me so happy with this. If you are new to the Brave Maker Show and you're watching live, you need to go and follow Christina on her Instagram page, and her hashtag is KRayCosplay.
Yes.
So check her out every week. She's doing this amazing mashup of iconic figures, and it's all because what? Tell people why you do this.
Well, actually, I love that you asked me that because we are just a few days away from the anniversary of Angel, who departed us, Chadwick. And so this is really amazing. He inspired me to really go hard with comic books and passions and creativity and what it is that I wanted to do. And so I committed to being in costume if I was on camera until I published my own comic book. And I'm so close, Tony. I got sketches back this week. That's how I'm braving my way. I got sketches back this week. It's so exciting.
That's great.
Yeah. So thank you, Chadwick Boseman. Beautiful, beautiful soul, actor, artist, just amazing person.
So we always start the podcast with that question: how are you braving your way? Because if you're here to tune into our special guest today, Abby Ginzberg, we know that making a movie, writing a comic book, creating music, it takes a lot of work. It doesn't just happen overnight, and sometimes it's years upon years of just little steps. So for me, this week, I have obviously some of you who follow know I've got a feature film. It's being edited as I am doing this live show across the room in our editing bay. Super cool to watch that come to life. But I have a short film coming out that stars Christina, executive produced by Christina, called Massive. So I was giving notes on it yesterday. Our sound designer got it in his hands today to begin the sound design. So we're really excited to be able to finish that. We're going to do a live screening of it in a couple weeks in Redwood City. So that's how I'm braving my way, moving the projects forward little by little. That's how you do it.
Yep. That's how you get it done.
Yeah, get it done. So if you are listening and watching, we always welcome your comments and your questions. Please let us know how you are braving your way. And if there's anything that we can do to help you brave your way, go to our website at bravemaker.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. We have fiscal sponsorships available for filmmakers to help you raise money. We do screenwriting workshops to help you write your film because we're passionate about seeing makers make. Anything you want to add, Christina, before we jump in?
Yeah, join the screenwriting class. I'll be there. I'm working on a documentary, and you start with the script. Who knew? So I'm starting there. So I will be in there writing a script for this documentary. I have like all this footage, and I'm editing it. So this is great. So I'll be in the class. So it'll be very cool.
Right on. Well, speaking of documentary, this is a great segue to our special guest today. I watched this movie and it was just fantastic. Get yourself onto Amazon Prime right now. Not right now. Stay on and listen to the conversation. But at some point, go and find the story, Speaking Truth to Power. It's the Barbara Lee story. And we're so excited to welcome Abby Ginzberg to the show today. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you.
Welcome, Abby.
Thanks for having me.
We're so stoked to have you. Christina loves to start us off.
I love it. We're going to jump right in. I watched this twice. It was so beautiful. You know, the first time as a filmmaker, watching it, taking notes. Second time, just wanted to enjoy it. So we're going to jump in with Abby. And before we get to the documentary, we want to know about you as a filmmaker. We want to hear your origin story. Where were you born and raised? And how did your upbringing uniquely prepare you for the work you're doing today?
So I was born and raised in Manhattan, and I still sound like I come from New York. So even though I've lived in California since 1972, you can do the math. I've lived there, 50 years practically. I still sound like I just got off the boat from New York. So I was born and raised in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. I went to public school. I grew up in a very diverse, both neighborhood and went to, as I say, public schools that, were very diverse themselves. So I think that prepared me for the world as I encountered it later in life and through college and so on. And I am very grateful that I did not have a protected background. I mean, I went to school on the bus and the subway, and I just had to figure out how to manage in New York. Then when I moved to California, I went to law school. So I did not start out as a filmmaker. I started out as a lawyer doing, progressive social justice work. I worked in a small community law firm. I did criminal defense, et cetera, et cetera. And then 10 years into my legal career, I had one of those aha moments where I thought, I can't do this for another 50 years and I'm going to be working another 50 years. So what am I going to do next? And that is, I think it was storytelling. I think that because I had done some jury trials, and I really loved engaging with juries and sort of telling the story of my client and, why they didn't do what they were said to have done and so on. I ended up feeling like, well, this is one form of storytelling where you get to tell it to 12 people and maybe a judge, but maybe there's something I can do to reach a larger audience. And that is literally, I mean, I didn't go to film school. I'd never made a film. I just thought, I got to figure out how I can be in dialogue with, a larger audience. And that is what led me to begin doing films. So I'm here. We're hearing part of the film. I can tell that's part of the film being played. So anyway, so that's how I got to it. And I have to say it was a decision that I never, ever looked back on. I gave up my bar card. I started making films, and slowly but surely, it's like I didn't start knowing I would have a niche, but I did have a niche. And my niche was telling stories about people who themselves were not well-known names, but whose lives intersected with those who were. So if I was going to do a South Africa story, I wasn't going to tell the Nelson Mandela story. I told the story of an obscure white guy who had been part of the anti-apartheid movement, but had been blown up while he was living in exile. And so, in telling the story of Albie Sachs, I get to tell the story of the sort of the whole anti-apartheid movement and of his connection to Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela, as part of history, is in the film, but it's not a film about Mandela. And that's been true pretty much for all the films that I've made, that there is some intersection between the people who I'm profiling that most people have not heard of, and key moments in either history or, something that brings them, sort of gives them more visibility once that people have seen the film. So that's my niche, is to tell many people. I mean, of course, people who live in the Bay Area and are represented by Barbara Lee know about her. But if you don't live in the Bay Area, you may, Barbara who? Yeah. So that was part of the motivation for making the film, was I felt I was represented by one of the truly great representatives in Congress. And I wanted people in Iowa and in Idaho and in Montana to know about her. So that's why I started.
I love it. I actually think you just shared your superpower with us. We're all about brave stories change the world, and you are the story. I think you have an incredible gift of identifying the story, the not so obvious story, not Nelson, not this person, but that person. This is the story, and here's why. I think that's amazing.
And let me say, I just want to add one other thing, which is sort of the criteria that I use is, if this person inspires me, the question I ask myself is, can I make a film about them that will inspire others? And unless I can answer that question, yes, I can't do the film. So that, there are not that many people that inspire me. You know what I mean? It takes a lot. It takes a lot of integrity. It takes a lot of a kind of a life purpose. So the people that are really like, the people that I'm trying to measure myself against, they're not by the dozens. They're, a handful of them. And to the extent that I can identify them and then figure out a way to tell their story so that maybe other, in Barbara's case, younger African-American women will be inspired. In another case, maybe, a young Latino boy will be inspired by my farm worker turned California Supreme Court justice. I look for kind of sort of who's the potential audience here. So that's another big thing for me.
I think you accomplished that in this film. I am a Bay Area resident and did not know much about Barbara Lee, but I knew of her, right? But I didn't know of some of the major moments
Mhm.
in our country's history that she has been connected to. And I actually used a part of the film speaking to a bunch of entrepreneurs on the East Coast via Zoom this past weekend, because she was so spot on to know why she's here, what she was about, what her mission and purpose in life was. And it was
Yes.
so clear. So I want to show the trailer to the film and then talk about the making of the film and what you learned by doing it. So here is the trailer to Speak Truth to Power, the Barbara Lee story.
And now a political icon in Congress fighting for social justice. Hometown hero, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
I see myself more as a public servant, not necessarily a politician.
She is exemplary of the courage that it takes to stick to your principles.
I was a student at Mills College as a young mother on welfare with 2 kids who's working in the community with the Black Panther Party, making sure people have something to eat. Social justice, that's always been just part of who I am. When I first came to Congress, they told us, don't use the word poverty. But Barbara Lee fights to elevate this issue. Raising the minimum wage to a living wage. That's a recommendation which this committee should embrace.
You meet her and you instantly feel connected to her spirit.
She's very values driven. It is coming from the core of her beliefs.
Barbara Lee is the conscience of the Congress. She is going to be that consistent voice for what's right.
President is authorized to use force. This is going to set the stage for endless war.
This resolution passed.
1 no vote on the board.
Central to democracy is the right to dissent.
She was right. It was important that her community understood the enormous risk she took in standing up for peace and justice.
When I feel like I'm under fire, I think about her example. She paved the way.
You can stand your ground, speak your piece, and survive.
I felt mentored by her example before I ever had the blessing of being mentored as a colleague.
My friend, daughter of Oakland, is now the vice president. So the East Bay is in the house. Because of Shirley Chisholm, I am, and because of Shirley Chisholm, Kamala Harris is. Continue to speak out, don't back down.
And as we say in my district, stay woke.
Just truly an incredible film, an incredible story. Please, again, go watch it. So we could talk about this film forever because there's so many great nuggets in it about history and Bay Area. But tell me, you said, by the way, thank you to Alex Todd, who's producing today and quoting you as you are live. You talked about finding a story about someone who inspires you. In order to make a film, you need to ask yourself that question. Obviously, there's so much to be inspired by Barbara Lee, but how did you connect with her? Did you have a personal connection? Talk about how the film came to be.
Yeah. So first it was as with every film, it was an idea in my head. Then I approached her, I think somewhat directly and also through her staff. And Barbara was like, I'm too busy. This doesn't really have my name on it. I don't really want to be followed by a camera. And she was like, no, not really. And then eventually she sort of turned me over to her staff. And what Barbara would say if you were asking her right now is she would say she was very difficult as a subject to get on board. And that is true. And she would also admit that it took me twice as long to make the film as it should have if she had agreed and been more cooperative. But something good happened in the interim. And so, it's like on the theory that there's things happen for a reason. What was happening over time between us is that we were building trust, or I was gaining her trust. She is not a very trusting person. She didn't know me. It wasn't like I was one of her best friends and said, Barbara, I'm going to make a movie about you. It was like I was a filmmaker who happened to be a constituent and could see in her story something that was really going to touch people and affect people. And I don't think she quite understood what it would mean to do something that was sort of part of popular culture and not really part of the political world. So I think she lacked some vision of what this thing was going to be. And she certainly lacked the fact that I needed her cooperation more than once for a sit-down interview. So we had to negotiate, and I said to her at some point, Barbara, I need to do a drive around with you in Oakland. Oakland is critical to who you are and your constituents and what we need to say about your relationship to Oakland. And it was like, yeah, well, that took about 6 months to schedule. And that is because she is so busy, booked up the wazoo all the time. And so to fit me in really required, long-term planning. And as I say, I think there was a certain kind of advantage to that because by the time certain scenes got filmed, including the last scene, we had established some trust. And she knew I was going to kind of stick to the four corners of her memoir. And I wasn't going to, push to, this wasn't going to be a tabloid piece. This was going to be a piece about what makes this woman tick. What are the things in her background that have led her to be able to be someone who could stand alone? 420 members of Congress vote one way and you vote the other. You've got to have a lot of inner strength to be able to sort of withstand that. How did she do it? What were the things that led to that, et cetera? So I am, the conscience of the Congress. What was it about her background that helped her become the conscience of the Congress? That's one of the things I wanted to answer. And I went into the film not knowing, she just talked, Christina just talked about having a script. I did not have a script. I knew what certain issues were that I wanted to cover because either they were important to me or I knew they were critical to Barbara. But I didn't have a script. This film was created in the edit room with me and my editor. And we tried things, and if it didn't work, we dumped them and we started again. So this was a film that was very much sort of trial and error. But what was clear from the beginning was that Barbara was going to be the centerpiece of her own film, and that I was going to work like hell to get the people around her who are her colleagues, to participate in this film. So that's why you get to see Cory Booker, Danny Glover, Ayanna Pressley, Lisa Blunt Rochester, who many people do not know is the only representative from Delaware and may one day be a senator from Delaware. As an African-American woman, that she will be making history, but nobody knows who she is. So I thought it was really important to introduce her in this film. And so I feel like the film is a bit of a who's who in the, Congressional Black Caucus, who's who in Congress today, who are these young people that are standing on Barbara's shoulders. That was a big piece of what I wanted to, share in this film. And so, I set about doing it. And let me say, the reason all these heavy hitters agreed to be in the film is not because they knew who I was. They did it because they wanted a chance to talk about Barbara. And that's why the other interviews are so powerful, is that these people love her, respect her. As John Lewis said, I should have been with her on that 2001 AUMF vote. Not everybody admits to sort of having voted a way that they now sort of have reconsidered. So I thought that was a very important part of the story.
Wow.
Yeah. And as I say, Alice Walker doesn't agree to a lot of interviews, but for Barbara Lee, she was willing to let me drive 4 hours from the Bay Area to go interview her. And I'm incredibly grateful for what, the ways in which sort of having these other perspectives helps build a larger portrait of Barbara, because you can't just have the subject tell their own story. You have to flesh it out. And I got lucky that the people around her are people with name recognition.
I felt the weight of all those people. It was just powerful seeing them on the screen talking. So kudos to you.
And I just want to say one thing about John Lewis. The first screening of this film in front of any audience was on July 16th, 2020 in a drive-in in Concord. So nobody had seen the film. It was going to be at the San Francisco International Film Festival and they canceled them. So this was the first time there was an audience for this film. And we watched it and Barbara was there. It was actually her birthday and John Lewis died the next day. And I just want to say, I felt like every one of the 1,000 people that were there felt like they had just spent the evening with John Lewis right before he passed. And there was something, and if he had died 2 days earlier, it would have felt like a funeral service. So I just felt, that the timing of that also, that somebody was looking out for us. Because you got to experience John Lewis. He was healthy when I interviewed him. He was vital. And then, he passed the next day. So, wow. I don't know what to say about it other than I felt blessed to get him at a time when he was healthy and when he could participate.
It was an absolute gift. Yeah, that he was a part of the documentary for sure. You had so many people with exceptional, beautiful core values. And I'm sure that was part of the reason Barbara Lee was like, no, I have this agenda and this is what I'm doing. What's filmmaking? Like, what is all this stuff? How does it help? You know what I mean? I get that. That's how pragmatic and serious and determined she is. And that's what I took away from the film. Like, if you want to get something done, do it. And that's kind of been your approach for this film. You said you didn't have a script. You just jumped in, which makes, like, I'm a super new filmmaker. That makes me so nervous. Where do you just jump in when you want to reach out to such heavy hitters, to such big names, and achieve something on such a large scale?
Well, getting Barbara, getting John Lewis was easy. Getting Barbara was hard. So I jumped. I mean, that's where I jumped in. I literally dove into the deep end. Okay. And my strategy was to do my best to sort of sell her on the other work I had done, which she respected and liked. So that part of it was to say, look at my other work. You know, I'm profiling people that you would admire and you might not even know about, but you're going to watch my work and think, okay, well, she's not a flake. She's going to do something decent with my life here. And then I started working with her staff. And as I have said, you know, I think her staff understood some of the potential for this film in a way that Barbara just couldn't see it. And I think, you know, part of the staff's job is to, you know, put her on press calls and get her story out there. I mean, that's part of their job. And I think they thought that this film would be in alignment with some of the work that they have to do. And so I think that kind of worked. And I think they were also happy about the idea of who else was going to be in this film, that this is a large group of very progressive allies. And there was one other thing that they also cared a lot about, which was this business of Barbara working across the aisle. So I had to have a discussion with, you know, the chief of staff about who I was going to interview, who was a Republican. And she suggested Walter Jones. And I think it's one of the strongest interviews in the film. And I found Josh Bolton, you know, George Bush's chief of staff. So I don't know. I mean, you know, there were a lot of different stories that I felt like needed to be underscored, accentuated, highlighted. And one of them is, as Van Jones says, you know, it's not about whether somebody's a Republican. It's about whether or not somebody can join with Barbara on an issue she really cares about, like HIV/AIDS. And George Bush was able to do that. So she was like all in with George Bush, given that he was going to create PEPFAR, even though she'd been all out with George Bush as the only member of Congress who said no in 2001. So you just, you know, it's a jigsaw puzzle and you're putting the pieces together. And at some point you sort of see how various pieces pick up on a theme and reinforce something else. And I don't know that. And at some point you say, okay, I'm done. I got to get this movie out.
That was one of my favorite parts, the George Bush part of this documentary. I was like, wow, this woman is so powerful. She's a bit of a politician whisperer. What she was able to achieve with the HIV/AIDS efforts, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary.
And as Lisa says in the film, Lisa Blunt Rochester says, Barbara, okay, so there's another thing I think to sort of pull out of the film, which is how Barbara uses her district as a way. It's like she's a canary in the coal mine. If something is going badly in Oakland, it's going to be going badly in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Miami and a million other places. But because Barbara is so close to the ground in her own district, there is a way in which she may know about it first. And she may care more about it than some other representative. So Barbara is paying attention at a sort of a hypersensitive level that I think some other politicians aren't. And so when AIDS and HIV hit the Black community in Oakland, Barbara was all over it. You know what I mean? And she was like, okay, we've got to do something to make this better. And so she declares this, you know, national emergency in Alameda County. Well, who does that? Nobody, but she did. So I just want to, you know, that's another thing I want to shout out to her, is that she's creative. She is taking, you know, kind of the insights that she's getting from her own constituents and community and using it to create national policy. You know, that's pretty damn good if you ask me. So I'm a big fan of how she has her ear to the ground and how she listens. And I just want to say, I see you're putting up our social media handles. Please like us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So I'm saying this to the audience, please pay attention. And I have to say one other caveat. I do not know what happened, But something happened so that Amazon has not yet put the film up, even though they promised to as of August 20th. It's not up. So you have to go access the film on iTunes. For the moment, just iTunes. It will be up on Amazon, but I would say if you're anxious to see the film, just get it on iTunes and go for it, because it's available there. I do not know how Amazon messed it up, but because they're a multinational, huge company, it could take a while before we hear what happened.
Okay, that's good. We will send our people there.
To iTunes. Just send them to iTunes.
Please go to iTunes to watch the movie, and on Instagram, Speaking Truth to Power Movie, as well as following them. I'll put the links if you're listening to the replay or on our audio podcast. They'll be in the show notes so you can follow and like. Now, you talk a lot, Abby, about the story, and the story is crucial to obviously the film, putting all the pieces together, the bipartisan way she was able to bring people to her values. And that's what obviously really stood out to me, the divisiveness in our country that right now is really at an extremely high level, especially in the political space and in the racial injustice space, and when it comes to healthcare and mental health. So all of these things I think are super relevant. I want to talk a little bit about as a documentarian, your filmmaking. What did you learn? Obviously, getting the pieces and putting them together in the editing room is challenging, but what did you learn about craft? About, there's no one right way to make a film, and it's learning as you do. It's putting the rocket together as it's launched off into space. Right. Yeah. But what are some practical filmmaking tips you might be able to share from what you learned in the making of this film?
One thing. Okay. So let me use the example of the 9/11 story. That is what Barbara is best known for, is her lone no vote. So the key challenge I felt going into the film that I faced was, where does that go in the story? If you start with it, and we don't start with it, we hold it back for 10 minutes at least. Mm-hmm. If you start with it, nobody knows enough about Barbara to care or to understand what that vote means to her. You're not with her in the emotional way that you need to be while she's going through the process of deciding how she's going to vote on the request from the Bush administration to give them unlimited military authority at that point to go into Afghanistan. So we struggled. I mean, we kept putting that, it's like if you put it too late, anybody who knows that that's her vote is like looking at their watch saying, why is this not in the film? And if you put it in too early, people who don't know anything about her don't care enough. So finding the right, and I think we found it. I'm very happy with where it is in the film, but that was not just obvious. You had to try it. And when it didn't work somewhere, because I'm looking at my watch thinking this is too far into the film, or it's too soon, or whatever. So we had the edited segment before we knew where it was going to go. So one thing I learned is getting the right moment of the film in the right time slot of the film is critical, because otherwise you lose your audience in a way that is not helpful. Mm-hmm. So then the question was, well, what do you need to know about Barbara so you care about how she's going to make that decision around 9/11? So we show her with her constituents. We share a little bit about the things she cares about. We position her in Oakland. We give you just enough, and we don't do any of her backstory, but we give you just enough to know that the line that she uses to introduce 9/11 is, if you're in public office, someday you are going to have to really make a hard decision, and you better be ready for it. And so that it's like at the point where she says it, it feels organic, and it takes you right into 9/11. So again, but all that had to be put together and created and so on. So that's one whole big thing. If you've got a key part of your film, knowing where it needs to go is big. Mm-hmm. The other question that every filmmaker is always challenged by is, where does the backstory go? Mm-hmm. Because again, if it comes too soon, it feels like you're doing a straight CV biography. That's not interesting. If it comes too late, nobody gives a damn. So figuring out how to talk about the fact that she grew up in segregated El Paso, that she was basically brought up by a mother whose father was in the military, what it was like to be in segregated El Paso, and then move to California thinking, as she says, segregation had ended, and boom, she can't be a cheerleader. All that tells you some really important stuff about her background, her birth story, etc. Well, again, for me, what was challenging was figuring out, where does that go? and we found a place for it, and I'm happy with that. But I think the key, every filmmaker needs to know what are they going to open their film with? Where's the main part of the story going to go? Where are you going to stick in the backstory so that it actually answers some questions that the audience is going to have, and not be too biographical, because biography is not interesting. If you're painting a portrait, you only need a little bit of the background. And how are you going to come out of that and show that the sort of moral center of your character remains the key thing that this film is about all the way to the end? And then at the end, we had a little bit of a joyous celebration. Barbara was not a fan of having it end. I'd like to not say how it ends, but Barbara was not a fan of that ending. And she has just, as I can tell you, she's been proved wrong by every audience. We just showed the film at the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival to an audience that was maybe 2/3 African American women. Oh my God, they loved the ending. So hello.
I did too.
Hello. So
I love it.
So Barbara's like, Abby, I can't believe you're ending the film like this. And I was like, okay, it's my film. I'm ending the film like this. We'll just see how it plays. She still isn't that happy with it. But again, I'm the one who has to take this film out into the world and make it sing. And I felt like that was the ending. So anyway, so I think that I've answered some more things about how do you piece a film together. And, and then the question is, how do you use music to transition from one sequence to another? Music is big. We had a fabulous composer named Osei Essed, Osei Essed, Essed. He's scored a lot of documentaries and he did a fabulous job here. And so having a good composer to work with, having a good graphic artist to work with, having good archival material to work with, I mean, all that helps a film to be better. Okay, and let me say one other thing. As a director, I feel like I get to choose. It's like if Barbara has something to say about 45 issues, I get to choose the ones that I care about. So I felt like showing, being able to tell that mini story about the Black Panther Party and what it meant to be a community worker, and how cutting her teeth working as a community worker for the Black Panther Party was like pivotal to her entire future life. Well, that was a choice I made, but I would stand by that choice, and support it and whatever, because I want people to know what the Black Panther Party did that was unique, and how they created medical clinics and schools and fed people. It's like, and Barbara was smack in the middle of all that. So why wouldn't I want to tell that story? And I care about the thing she says, that everybody's poo-pooing the issue of poverty and we all got to talk about the middle class. Well, it's like, no, we have poor people in this country. We need to be talking about poverty. And the fact that I had a whole sequence where I could talk about how people are creatively dealing with helping people rise from poverty, like the G's Clippers barbershop, etc.
Oh, that was a great clip.
That's something that I care about. So I decided we're going to Milwaukee and we're going to be part of this anti-poverty thing, and we're going to document it. And then I'm going to figure out how to put it in the film, because I want this film to say something about that issue. So that it's like the filmmaker makes a lot of choices that look organic, but you're coming from your own values as you're moving along through this material. And so that issue of poverty and homelessness and a lot of the other things that are in the film are things I care about. So it's like easy. There's a correspondence between what I care about and what Barbara cares about. Let's put it in the film, yeah, that's all.
It felt like films within a film, with the Black Panther segment that you did, with the clip, with the barber shop that you highlighted. It felt like those could have been individual documentaries on their own. It was so powerful. Abby, I can't believe your storytelling is so potent. I want to go back. You cut your teeth in a courtroom. Do you think that, these are the highest stakes for storytelling. This could be life or death based on the story that you tell, the portrait that you paint of your clients. Do you think that has really helped the storytelling that you're doing now in film? Because it is so potent, it's so powerful. Yeah. You really are identifying issues that speak to our hearts, that we immediately this is it. This is the issue. This is where we need to focus our energy.
That is a really good question, and I'm not sure. Here's what I thought I took from my legal background was, some notion of of order and coherence. And like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to make a sloppy movie because I can't stand that, and I'll be able to identify it, you know. So it's like, if something doesn't fit in the film, I'm going to notice it and I'm going to have to throw it out. But I think what you're saying is interesting, that you know, that I cut my teeth with high stakes, because if I lost my case, my client was going to jail. And so maybe the sense that the stakes are high in terms of getting it right is something that I've internalized without even being that much aware of it. I mean, that's why it's such a good question, because I don't actually know. But I, you know, again, no, and one of the reasons I like being a filmmaker is nobody goes to jail if the film is a bit of a bust. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I screw up the jury stuff, someone's going to jail. That felt always like too much responsibility to me. I just couldn't bear it. And, you know,
Mhm.
and nobody went to jail that I actually took to a jury trial. So that was good. I wanted
Hey.
to quit. Well, I wanted to quit while I was ahead. I really did not want to start losing cases and feeling like my clients were going off to San Quentin for 20 years. I couldn't do it.
Mm.
So I got out while the getting was good. I was like, okay, you've got a good track record. Let's find something else to do.
Well,
but I appreciate that question.
We're so
Absolutely.
inspired by the fact that your life, you know, your past, your history, your justice system involvement inspired this call and effects and impacts, even though you're still figuring it out and don't quite see the correlation. I think it's beautiful. This film, we want people to go and see. If you are
Mhm.
watching live or, you know, on the replay, speakingtruthtopowermovie.com. Please share this. You could just share the trailer that's on YouTube with people. You can see there's so many interviews. If you want more
Yeah.
Barbara Lee and more Abby Ginzburg, there's so many great interviews that they have done together virtually, Zoom. It's so great. Follow them on all of their social media channels and comment on the work, and now connect with them. And Abby,
Can I say one other thing?
yes,
Just
go ahead.
about I just want to say something about the timeliness of this film,
Yep.
because of what we're seeing on the news in terms of Afghanistan. Okay,
Mhm.
when we picked the date of August 20th for that to be the release date, nobody would. I mean, we didn't even really think about the fact that we would be coming up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
Oh yeah.
So we are caught in a good way in a vortex of media interest in Barbara's lone no vote, in the fact that over 20 years she has hustled every year to get more and more members of Congress to vote with her, so Congress takes back its war-making authority. So that's a huge deal. And we have Barbara saying, you know, in all these interviews that you're referencing, that she is so sad by what is going on in Afghanistan, because she sort of saw 20 years ago that it was an unwinnable situation.
Mhm.
And so to think about the lives lost and the tragedies that have ensued in the past 20 years, just in Afghanistan, forget all the other 39 other places that we've had military incursions. You know, and people have said to her, do you feel vindicated? And she says, no, I don't feel vindicated. I'm just sad, because I understood that we were making a decision as Congress at a time, she said, as a psychologist, where I knew, or a social worker, I knew we should not be giving, just like you don't buy a house when someone just dies because you're just so distracted by the grief. She was like, we are so distracted by the grief of 9/11, we should be making no major decisions.
Yeah.
And we should give ourselves time as Congress to let the dust settle and see where we are. And, you know, 420 other members of Congress, the entire Senate and the rest of the House, said, no, we're going to vote with George Bush on this. And that's that. But it is a moment to take stock of how prescient she was, of how right she was, of how her instincts about this is not a time to be making this kind of a broad decision, you know. And so we get the 20-year retrospective and we get the movie at the same time. So it is really a moment. It is her moment in the sun, I would say, for people to just understand, you know, how amazing she was and still is.
Thank you so much for sharing this great movie with us. Please go watch this. Please share this. And Abby, we're really grateful for your filmmaking talents and your ability to tell an
Mhm.
amazing story about an amazing woman. Truly, it was a history lesson for me, but it was also super inspirational to me as not just a filmmaker or someone who's interested in politics, but as a human. So well done. Well done. We're going to go
Well, thank
into
you.
our favorite section of the show, Brave Faves.
Brave Faves. TV shows, films, books, songs, technology, clothing, podcast, food, and more. These are a few of our favorite people, places, and things. Brave Faves.
Hi, this is the time when we talk about what is our favorite thing of the week. Can be anything, and it is going to be starting with you, Christina Jackson. What you got?
All right, amazing. So I am one of my favorite spiritual teachers is Eckhart Tolle, and I follow him on YouTube, and he does these great segments. And recently he put up a video called "What If Life Was a Movie? What if the challenges in life were the drama in a movie?" And he actually goes on to break down what makes for a really amazing movie and what makes for an okay movie. And it really points to actually, what Abby's documentary is about, the inner conflicts that we have to struggle with and what we have to overcome, and our integrity and our values. And so a great movie, the characters resolve something internally. A good movie, the issues are external and they're resolved externally. And he goes into it in a little bit more detail. But it's beautiful just to hear the take on movies from a spiritual teacher. I never expected for him to be talking about films. As a filmmaker and an actor, it was just a joy to come across this video. And I think if you're an actor or a filmmaker, you'll love his response to what really makes a truly amazing movie. What separates the good ones from the exceptional ones that you watch over and over again. That is my Brave Fave for the week.
Sounds like you are the story. Live it out, people. I love it. I love it. Abby, what you got? What's yours?
So I wanted to promote two documentaries just because that's my corner of the world here. So I loved and have seen 4 times Summer of Soul by Questlove. I mean, this is this guy's first movie. So all I can say is, what he brought to it was his amazing musical talent. But I strongly recommend this, and I think you can watch it over and over again. It is one of the most entertaining and educational pieces I have seen in the last couple of years. So I love it. Thumbs up for Summer of Soul, and it introduces you to kind of the early years of some of our greats, Stevie Wonder, Nina Simone, and this amazing crowd that gathered in, a park in Harlem in 1969 that none of us ever heard of. So that was amazing. And then the other one that I want people to know about is Not Going Quietly. This is the Addie Barkan story. He was diagnosed with ALS in his early 30s, and it is the story of a cross-country trip that he takes as an activist for disability rights. And I just think it is amazing. I think he is amazing. And it isn't, again, he's a guy that inspires me now that I've seen the movie about him. He obviously inspired somebody else who decided to make the movie. But I just feel like everybody should watch this, because if any of us, who knows what's going to happen to us? We could get hit by a car, we could get MS, we could get cancer, whatever. This is about resilience and just the drive to keep living. And he's got this incredibly cute little son who I think is the star of the movie. So I strongly recommend Not Going Quietly, the Addie Barkan story.
Fantastic. I love that we get to learn and be inspired by so many different cool stories. So we'll put those links in our show notes. Go and check those out. So my Brave Fave is totally different than both of yours. And that's the beauty of how people consume great different media. But I stumbled upon this show because somebody else said, this is my favorite thing. It's called Dave. It was something I did not even think I was going to like. It's a TV series about a rapper who's a real guy in real life named Lil Dicky, who talks about his challenge of being born with a twisted urethra and has affected his anatomy. I know that sounds kind of crass, but the show is so deep, and although it's a comedy, and you'll see a picture, there's Dave Bird right there if you're watching, and visually he is a Jewish guy, very thin, curly hair, kind of awkward, but he can rap and he can spit these amazing lyrical poems. It's so awesome. But he also deals with this, speaking of story, inward shame about his body shame. You don't hear a lot of men talking about body shame and their issues, and there's so many so many issues surfaced about privilege and whiteness and ethnicity. It is blowing my mind with how powerful and poignant this show, that has a lot of jokes and a lot of crass anatomy jokes is speaking to me about culture and about art in a very powerful way. So it's called Dave. It's on FX on Hulu, and I highly recommend it. So that's our show this week, y'all. My name is Tony Gappasone. You can find me on the socials at Tony Gappasone or at Tony Gappasone. I'd love to hear from you, hear about what you're working on, hear about things that are going on in your life, and as well as who we are at Bravemaker. Don't forget, we're a nonprofit, so we depend on your generosity to do this work, to support filmmakers like Abby, to have conversations like this. We would love it if you go to our website at bravemaker.com and sign up for our e-news so you can get in your inbox twice a month. That's all we email is 2 times a month. We shot out an email this week about Abby's film for you to go watch it with her website and socials. And would love to make sure you know about our classes coming up, like our Screenwriters Workshop, which starts on September 8th and goes every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Christina, what do we got coming up next week? What's going on?
Next week, we definitely have a great show. Actually, tonight. Let's jump in tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be joined by filmmaker Dana Johnson. They have an amazing documentary available. I watched it on YouTube. It's available on YouTube. They're activists. It's phenomenal. And they will be joining us at 6 p.m. for a special screening and panel discussion. Is that right, Tony?
That's right. Yeah, you can find the link right here on our website. Go to bravemaker.com. You can meet Dana Johnson and buy tickets for the film. And that's going to happen in an hour and 15 minutes. So today's a double feature documentary for us. So fun. And then next week, Christina, you want to talk about, do you know Cameron Johnson's on the show with us?
Yeah, our fellow actor and friend Cameron's going to be joining us. How exciting is that? Super excited to have him on. He'll be the first person I knew before filming. So that should be a fun, casual conversation with a fellow Bay Area actor who is out there doing it. Very inspired by him. Very inspired.
You'll find out more information on our website and email, but he is in a film called Notorious Nick, which just released from Lionsgate Film. It's the true story about a wrestler who has one arm, and there you see Cameron James is his best friend, and we're going to talk to him about his role in this wrestling film, as well as some of the other amazing work that Cameron's doing. So you can join us next week. And Christina, anything else you want to share before we sign out of here?
Just, come back an hour and 15 minutes for our special screening. And otherwise, I think it's time to say what we say at the end of these shows.
That's right. Thank you, Abby, so much for being on the show.
Great to be here.
Stick around for a picture after the bumper, but we always like to say brave stories change the world.
And you are the story. Goodbye, everybody.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at bravemaker.org. Like, subscribe, and share. To become a monthly donor, text the word BraveMaker to 44321 or go to bravemaker.com/donate. Thanks for tuning in.